Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a Christmas A-frame cabin with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. The sign, you can have it say anything. Mine says fresh Christmas trees, with the idea that this is a Christmas tree lot with a cute gingerbread man and Christmas themed cabin in the background. However, if you wanted to say ski lodge or Merry Christmas or anything you want, you're welcome to change that and customize it. Let's go over materials, brushes, and colors that we'll need for this painting. I'm going to be using the black and white POSCA paint pens for some of the detail work in this. I love using these pens. The white one is fun for snowflakes. The black one is fun for outlining and lettering. A ruler is helpful because there's some basic drawing in this, but it's easier to do with a ruler. Pencil, and for the lights, I'm actually going to use the back of an eraser on a pencil to stamp the little lights, so that makes it super easy to do. One of the brushes that I'll be using this is actually a makeup foundation brush by e.l.f. I occasionally like to use this to make a blended background, and that's what I decided to do in that sky. If you don't have that brush or don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can use the 3/4 flat for the sky and be fine. And so brushes, 3/4 flat, 8 long round, 12 bright, 3/8 inch angle. I grabbed all the brushes for this, and the number 4 round. So if you don't have all those brushes or don't want to use all those brushes, you can actually get away with doing this painting with just 2 brushes. So the 3/4 flat and the 4 round are really the most versatile brushes. So if you want to just do it with these 2, you can definitely do that. The other 3 are for more fine-tuned techniques. And as far as colors go, I like to use the Liquitex Basics paints, but you can use whatever brand you have available or even do similar colors. Titanium white, Prussian blue, just that really dark blue color that we'll be using in the background. Burnt sienna, Pyrrole red. So you don't have to use this red. You can use any red, the cad red medium, quinacridone, magenta even. That's just for the little bow and candy cane and some details on the gingerbread man. That's it. Mars black, Hooker's green hue, and primary yellow. I'm working on an 11 by 14. However, you can do this on any size canvas, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So with a ruler and a pencil, I am going to mark 4 inches on the left of the canvas and draw a wavy line. So that is going to be the horizon line. So everything above that line is going to be our night, snowy sky, and everything below the line is going to be snow. So I'll be using the 3/4 flat and that blender brush, which is optional. I'm going to start with just Prussian Blue. You can actually use phthalo blue instead of Prussian Blue if you don't have Prussian Blue, but I love how deep this color goes. So pretty. So I'm going to apply this with the 3/4 flat in big angled paint strokes at the very top of the canvas and just kind of fill the top kind of 2-inch area of the canvas with that dark blue. And then without rinsing the brush, grab some titanium whites and go below that dark blue and start doing those same big angled paint strokes. It's going to quickly turn into a medium to light blue color. And you're just going to apply that a few inches below that. I've covered about half the sky at this point. Before that dries, I'm going to take my blender brush and I'm going to blend those 2 colors together. So if you're not using the blender brush, you can take a dry brush, like a dry 3/4 flat brush, and kind of do what I'm doing to blend it. You don't want to apply paint onto this brush. You want it to be dry with, the whole point is to blend it. And I like to do these fun kind of circle blends. So we don't want to keep going until everything turns the same color. We want it to be darker at the top and kind of lighter at the bottom. And then I'm going to grab more Prussian blue and add more darker color at the top, and then I'll go back and blend that. So with this brush, I'm not pressing down very hard with it. I'm using just the very end of the bristles and just very lightly kind of swirling it around. I'm not trying to push the paint around. I'm just trying to slightly blend it. And then I'm going to take more titanium white. So as you're doing this, if you need to wipe the brush or kind of rinse it to start over, you can. We need this bottom part of the sky to be kind of a light blue color at this point. So we have medium in the middle, dark at the top, light blue at the bottom, and swirl it with the brush. It's okay to go below that horizon line, and if your pencil line just kind of disappears, that's fine. We can always figure it out later or redraw the line if we need to. And just fill this last little spot. And then rinse your brushes. So we don't need the blender brush anymore after this. We are going to paint the snowy ground next. I'm going to rinse and wipe the brush. And you know what? It's okay if a little bit of blue got into that white. So as I'm doing this, you see how there's like a teeny bit of blue on there still because I didn't rinse it off completely or some of the blue got into the white on my palette. Either case, we kind of want this to be a light blue and not necessarily a pure white, just so it can kind of show on the canvas. And we can always layer on bright white later. I'm going to double check with the ruler where that 4-inch mark was and use the tip of the brush to kind of outline a line across the sky. The bottom of my sky is still wet, so that color is blending with my white, and that's okay. I'm just going to fill the rest of this area in. And again, it's okay if we have little bits of blue in there. It's already starting to create shadows in the snow, which is what we want. When you're done with this step, you want everything to dry before going on to the next step, and that is going to be drying the A-frame cabin. And you need to have a ruler for this, or I recommend a ruler for this. So we're going to place this structure on the right side of the canvas, way far back, so it's just below the horizon line, but right here. The width of the bottom of this triangle is about 7.5 inches. So I marked 7.5 inches, and see how there's like a little bit of gap on the right of it. So it doesn't go all the way to the far right edge of the canvas. It's maybe like a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches to the side. And then find the center of that. So 3.75 would be the center. And then I'm going to draw a straight line all the way up. So you can make that line go all the way up across the canvas. So that line is going to help us find the top of the triangle or the apex of the triangle. And we still want a little bit of gap above the top of the triangle. So I'm going to do 6.5 inches. And then I'm going to connect. So I made a dot at 6.5 inches. I'm going to connect that line and then connect the dot here. So now I have my triangle shape. I'm actually going to bring this down. It shouldn't be floating. And I'm going to do like a little path. And I'll end up making that path a little bit kind of more wavy when I paint it in. And I'm going to take this bottom line and bring it down just a little bit. So all of that line is under the sky and not floating in the sky at all. Which actually that should be fine because our snow kind of goes behind the cabin anyway. I want to do another line in the left This is going to be the line that's holding the pole, that's going to be holding the string lights. So a vertical line, a little oval on the top of that line, and then another line. So this pole is about 5.5 inches, and you can do a little bit of snow on the bottom and then do, so yeah, about 5.5 inches tall, but if you want to make yours taller or shorter, you can. I just want to have room for the Christmas trees below the string lights. So if you need to make it higher so your string lights can go up higher so you have enough room for your trees below that, that was kind of the point of that. And that is it for the drawing part. There's other details we'll add to this, but we'll be able to just paint those in. We have enough lines to go by for the basic composition of this painting. So I would recommend, if you have painter's tape, actually makes painting the cabin a little bit easier. I don't have painter's tape with me, so I'm going to be using an angle brush to really get in there to help me outline the edges of the triangle, and then I can fill them in appropriately without the paint going outside the lines. So we want the color titanium white and burnt sienna on our paint palette next, and we want to use a 3/8 inch angle brush. If you don't have an angle brush, you can use the 12 bright, you can use the 3/4 flat for this. And we're going to load our brush into a little bit of Mars Black and burnt sienna. I'm actually going to mix this over here to the side. So about 2 parts burnt sienna to 1 part black, and this should be a very dark brown. So I'm just going to use the angle of the brush to cut in on that shape. So I have the shape outlined on the inside part. And then on the bottom. So you want to just outline all of that. But when we fill it in, we're going to be filling it in with horizontal paint strokes so that we can create the texture of the wood siding. So we're going to be going horizontally, and so you can do this, or you can grab a flat brush and do that, but you want to do all horizontal paint strokes. And it's okay if we have different variations of brown and black in there. So left and right, blending the brown gently with the black so you create some different variations. So see how some areas are showing up a little darker, some are showing up a little bit lighter with just the brown. Outline the bottom and basically just fill your entire triangle in. I'm going to get a little bit of darker color in there, just kind of gently blend that in, and that'll help with the texture of our cabin. And we can see lines, we can see horizontal lines because our paint strokes are going horizontal. Next, I'm going to wipe the brush off. I don't need to rinse it, but I'll just wipe it. And so I like to just use a rag when I paint and use that same rag to wipe off brushes when I need to. And then black. So we want to outline, it could be the outer part of the triangle or the inner part. I'm doing the outer part actually, or right on that line with solid black. So this is going to be, we're not going to be able to really see the color of the roof in this painting because it's going to be covered in snow, but that's just going to be kind of where the roof is, where that shadow part of the roof is, and the snow will be above that, but we're not going to do snow just yet. Next, I'm going to switch to the 12 bright brush, and I'm going to paint the path. So I'm going to use the same colors that I used in the sky to paint the path. So the Prussian blue and the titanium white. I'm going to double load my brush in both of the colors. so that it shows up. It needs to show up at darker than the snow so that it shows up. And you're just going to use the end of your paintbrush to do very loose left and right paint strokes. Start at the cabin, and then as you go down to the bottom edge of the canvas, you can have your path curve if you want. If you want it to be like a straight path, you can do it that way. But for perspective reasons, the path should be bigger on the bottom and then kind of more narrow at the top towards the base of the cabin. And that's where our door will be later on. Next, I'm going to paint the pole. And so we got to get the blue off of our brush. But I'm going to still use this number 12 bright brush. You can also do this with the 3/4 flat or the round brush if you're only using 2 brushes for this tutorial. And let's get some fresh titanium white on our paint palette. Our pole overlaps the cabin a little bit, and that little triangle part where it's overlapping is not dry, so I am anticipating that color kind of mixing in with it here. So I'm going to take brown and white, so burnt sienna, titanium white. I'm going to just start painting this in. It's a narrow rectangle shape. I'm going to go up, and right here is where it's going to smear a bit because it goes over that cabin. I'm going to just kind of use that gray as part of the color of the pole and just kind of continue to paint it in. These are all vertical paint strokes. I'm pretty much just using the full width of my brush to paint this in. I'll do the side of the brush to kind of outline this. That curve at the top, I'll probably just paint that with a round brush and paint it black, but there will be snow on the top of that. So to get my round brush, Mars black, and do like a little oval shape. And we'll do snow on top of that later. Next, I'm going to rinse that brush and let's work on some of the snow on the ground. We painted a first layer earlier, but I'm going to take white and kind of make it pile up. Ended up turning a little bit brown, but that's okay. Pile up on the bottom of the pole. And then on the bottom of the snow pile, blend in a little bit of the Prussian blue, so it gives the snow a little bit of shadow. Keep in mind that Prussian blue is a very, very dark, deep blue color, so you only need a teeny bit of that color to blend it in to make shadows in the snow. And then I'm going to take more of that white and the round brush and make little snow piles that are on the left and the right of the path. So these are just kind of really thick, rounded paint strokes that are going to kind of overlap that path a little bit, but see how that paint stroke kind of curves and bunches up together next to that path, so it slightly overlaps it. I can take a little bit more of that blue and go on the bottom of that and kind of blend a little bit of shadow in on the bottom of what I just did. But same kind of paint strokes, little rounded paint strokes. And now I'm just kind of dragging left and right paint strokes on the path. It kind of looks like an ice skating path or something. And then I'm going to take titanium white. I'm not going to rinse my brush off. If there's some blue on there still, that's fine. And just do some random snow piles throughout the landscape with a pure white, because our first layer was kind of a bluish color. So I'm using pure white to layer on more piles of snow kind of all throughout the snowy land area. Next, I'm going to rinse my brush and use black to paint the string for the string lights. If you want to use a paint pen for this, you can. So I'm going to use the round brush and Mars black. I'm going to roll my brush because I'm going to do a fine line and start at the top of the pole and do a very thin line. Paint ran out, so I'm going to add a little bit of water in there, twist my brush again. So it helps to loosen the color up for a longer flow of your paint stroke. So there's a curved line for the string lights. Next, I'm going to rinse the full round brush and do a little bit more detail work on the cabin. I'm going to mix a lighter brown to do the fascia of the roof. So this is going to go directly under that black line that we did earlier. And if it's not completely dry, that's fine. If it's like soaking wet, I would wait for it to dry a little bit. So titanium white and the burnt sienna, it needs to be a very light brown. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to do kind of a thicker line than that black line that we did. And I'm just going to gently kind of paint this right under that black line. So it needs to be a much lighter color than our first layer. So we can still see that black line on the edging. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Next, I'm going to do the siding texture that's on the front part of the cabin. So I'm going to use the round brush in the same colors. So I'm going to very kind of loosely do, this needs to be all horizontal paint strokes, but I'm leaving a lot of dark brown gaps in between these lines. So I'm taking this, and I'm leaving a little bit of a gap between those outlines that we just did on the sides of the triangle, the fascia of the roof line. There's a gap between that. And this is just doing that kind of wood texturing on the front, leaving a lot of that dark brown still showing. And it's almost like I'm dry brushing this and not applying a very thick layer. I'm very lightly applying this. So again, it's a whole bunch of white with a little bit of brown. And taking the round brush and just very lightly left and right paint strokes. I'm going to get in there closer to the edge of that roof line, but I still want to leave kind of the dark brown shadowing in there. Next, I'm going to rinse this brush, and I need some pure titanium white for this. I'm going to do the snow that's on the roof. And I'm going to take my white, take this, and thick layer of paint. And I'm kind of wiggling my brush as I'm applying this. It goes all the way to the top of the roof and all the way to the bottom. It can overlap that black line or even some of the brown line that we did. But for the most part, I still want that black line to still show. Before this white dries, I want to do a little bit of shadowing on the snow. So I'm using a little bit of the Prussian Blue. You only need like a dot of paint on your brush to make this work. And I'm just very gently blending that blue on the bottom part of the snow, and that gives that some shadowing. I'm going to do this to both sides. So again, I'm still not covering up that black line I did earlier. That is like the shadow part of the roof of what's still visible that the snow's covering most of the roof, but there's still some dark shadowing below that. And then if we did too much blue, we could always wipe the brush, and then I'm actually just using a dry brush right now to blend this in. So that's one way you can blend it in with no paint on the brush. Or you can apply more titanium white and blend that even further if you did too much blue. Next, I'm going to do the trees. So I am going to load my palette with the color Hooker's Green Hue. We don't need to mix that green with anything. We can just use that. And I'm going to use the 8 long round brush. So there's so many different ways you can do Christmas trees. I'm going to show you this one way that I like to do them. So it helps to do a line for the middle of the tree, and you can use a ruler if you want your line to be more straight. Mine ended up being kind of crooked. And then I like to go from the top of the line and then brush down. And the fun thing about this 8 long round brush is you can do big paint strokes and little paint strokes. So if you stroke down and kind of release the pressure, your bristle will kind of, or the end of the bristle kind of creates that point on the end of your paint stroke to make it look more branch-like. And so you're just doing those curved strokes down, going all the way down to create that conical tree shape. And each of these trees, we're not really going to see the bottom, so we don't have to do the trunk. So they kind of just disappear off the bottom edge of the canvas. So there's one tree. I'm going to do another one using the same technique. And this time I'm going to use a T-square ruler to help make my line straight. So I'm going to decide maybe this one's going to be a little bit taller than the other one. And then get my T-square and do a vertical line. So I just use the end tip of the brush to do the vertical line and go all the way to the bottom of the canvas, and then load it into the green, and then you're just brushing down and out. And if it helps, you can draw a triangle shape with chalk or lightly with a pencil so that you can kind of figure out how that's going to be filled in, so you can create more of a triangle shape with the tree. But I just make my branches wider as I go down, and that creates that conical shape. So you're just brushing down. As you work your way to the bottom, your branches get wider, bushier. This one, we can just say for now it's overlapping the tree on the left. And then I'm going to do a third tree. So this one's going to be shorter. I'm not going to use a ruler for it, so we can just do a line. And you can even do these without the line. You can just start painting branches without using the vertical line. And then brush down to form your branches. There's going to be a decorated Christmas tree on the right side of this painting, but I'm not going to do that yet until I do the rest of the detail work on the cabin. I am going to rinse the 8 round and set that to the side and go back to my 4 round brush. The cabin is not yet quite dry all the way to do more detail work, such as a door and windows. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit further. And in the meantime, I'm going to take my take some fresh titanium white and my 4-round brush, and I'm going to do the snow that's piled up on the pole here. So a little pile of snow. And then, of course, take a little bit of Prussian Blue and blend that a little bit on the bottom of that. The next thing I'm going to do is use the back of a pencil, the eraser part, to stamp on the string lights. And this is super easy. I'm going to load primary yellow onto my paint palette. And I'm using a fresh new pencil with a flat eraser on the back. I'm going to load that into the yellow and stamp. And that creates your little circle for each of the string lights. I'm going to stamp it and make them fairly even apart, although they're not perfectly evenly spaced apart, that's okay. So maybe about a 1/2 inch apart. And I do have to reload this into the paint each time. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the cabin. So I'm going to have string lights go along the inner part of our roof framing. So this time I'm going to mix yellow and white together. That's because we're working on a darker surface, and this allows it to show up a little bit brighter. So actually this circle is overlapping that wood piece just slightly, so it's going along this part of the frame. And I'm spacing these little circles about a finger width apart. So if they're not perfectly spaced apart, that's fine. And then what I like to do with lights is go back with a round brush and pure titanium white, and I'm just making a little white circle on the inside of all of the bulbs, and this will give it that extra brightness for each of the light bulbs. It brightens up that yellow circle. So you can do that to the hanging string lights above the trees, and then the ones that are strung on the cabin as well. By now, the front part of the cabin should be dry, and we can add our door and windows. So I'm actually using a chalk pencil right now, but you can use a regular pencil for this too. And to just kind of draw a rectangle shape for the door. So the door is about 2 inches high and about 1.25 inches wide. And I'm going to take my 12 bright brush and make that light brown color again. So that's a bunch of white with just a little bit of the burnt sienna color. So it should show up pretty much the same color that we used to create the horizontal siding texture we did earlier, but this time I'm filling this in solid so we don't see anything through it, and my paint strokes are going vertical instead of horizontal. So I'm going to fill that whole rectangle shape in. Maybe do a little bit of color variation by adding some darker of the dark brown in there and kind of blending it. And then I'm going to use my round brush to, let's see, it can outline the outer frame of this door. So I'm mixing black and brown using the round brush, and I'm just going to very carefully make a frame around that shape. And then just for fun, I'm doing some vertical lines in there to create some wood texture on that door. So those are going in a vertical direction instead of a horizontal direction like the rest of the cabin. I'm making that light brown again and doing some more like vertical strokes. And we have 2 windows. Actually, we're going to do 3 windows. So for the window that goes above the door, we can do I'm going to do a triangle shape for this, but if you want, you can do a circle, you can make it a square. I am going to put a Christmas wreath kind of in between that, so above the door and below that window. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to make a triangle shape and leave a gap above the door. So this is primary yellow and titanium white mixed together. Adding that white into the yellow will make that yellow opaque enough to where you can get really good coverage over that dark layer of the cabin. So you're just painting a triangle shape, and we'll frame this out if it doesn't look even. It'll have a frame, and then 2 windows on each side of the door, so the top horizontal line of the window lines up with the top horizontal line of the door. And these windows will also have a frame. So line up the bottom part of each of the windows so they're even. I'm going to rinse the brush and actually do the framing around the windows next. If you do this and it's just kind of running too much into the yellow paint, then maybe we'll wait for it to dry a little bit, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So the framing color is the same as the door. You want to mix black with the burnt sienna color and just outline the outer part of the shape and see it is starting to drag some of that yellow into it, but it turned out fine. And this really just helps to define the shape of your windows. It makes it a little bit more straight and even. And we'll wait for the yellow part to dry before doing the window lines on the inside that overlap that yellow. I'm going to rinse and use pure titanium white to do snow. So we have some snow piling up on the top of the door. We can do a little doorknob. If you want to get creative and do like a different color, you can. Be a little bit of light outlining with the white on the edges of the door, and then some white on the top of the windows. And there would be snow piling up on the ground that would be overlapping the bottom part of that cabin a little bit. We're going to leave no snow in front of the bottom part of the door, so we're going to leave that open. And then next I'm going to show you how to add the snow on the trees. So I'm going to use, we can use the round brush, or we can use the 8 long round brush, but either way you just grab your white, start on the bottom of your branches. The last time we started on the top, this time we're going to start on the bottom, and then you're doing your little branches, but you're leaving a gap, so a space between, so that you're not covering all of that dark green. So you do a row of branches and leave a gap, and a row of branches. And if the green's not dried all the way and it's starting to mix a little bit with the white, that works. It kind of gives us a nice light green layer. And then when that dries later, we can add brighter white to it. So that's fine. So mine is starting to turn light green because my green isn't dry all the way. I just switched to the 8 round brush for this. But like I said, this can be done with both any round brush really, but I really like how the branches create kind of more of a point to it when you do the long 8 round brush because it's more pointy. So I'm just repeating this technique for each of the trees, leaving a green gap between each of the rows. Next, I'm going to paint the sign on the pole, which is completely optional. The inspiration for this painting really came from, I wanted to paint a Christmas tree lot. And so to make it more of a Christmas tree lot, I wanted to do a sign that said fresh Christmas trees or fresh cut trees. So that's where this sign idea came from. If you don't want to do the sign, you don't have to, or you can make the sign say something else like ski lodge. But I'm just doing the 12 bright brush and a light brown, and I'm just using the full width to create a sign. It's kind of going at an angle, and to make that light brown, it's like a whole bunch of white with brown, and actually mix a little bit of yellow into it too. It makes it kind of like a cream brown color. So you do the shape of the sign, and you'll want to let that dry before doing anything else to it. We'll have to do another layer on it later. And next, I really wanted a gingerbread man in this painting because the cabin looks like a gingerbread house. And it would be so cute to have this little guy kind of greeting you at the Christmas tree lot sign. So that's what I'm going to do. For the gingerbread man, and you can do this, so you can do a snowman or other customized details for this. You don't have to do a gingerbread man, but I recommend drawing it out first and before we paint it in. Start with the head, ovals that go, or an oval that goes horizontally for the arms, and then the legs. So keep it very, very simple. And then when you have the basic shape of the gingerbread man drawn out, we're going to use the burnt sienna color. So this is the 4 round brush in burnt sienna, and I'm just going to paint everything a solid brown color. And before this dries, I'm going to load my brush that has that brown on it into white. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white, And then just start to do, so I'm doing these like short little paint strokes, but the intention is to blend a little bit of that white into that dark brown, but keep the edges of the gingerbread man dark. So you only need like a dot of white on your brush. Little short paint strokes, but leave the edging that dark brown. Load your brush into more white now and do the same thing. Add a lighter layer, but leave the edging without that extra lighter layer. So we just layered on 3 lighter tints of brown. Leave the edges dark. That gives it more of that 3-dimensional look. By now the gingerbread man is saturated. We can't really do anything else to it until it dries, but we could do a layer of snow on the bottom that's kind of overlapping its feet. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and load it in just the white and carefully do a little pile of snow that's overlapping the bottom of the feet. And if we want to, we can even go back with a dot of blue and blend that on the bottom for some shadowing. Next, I'm going to do the window pane line. So ideally the yellow is dry or mostly dry. And load your round brush into Mars Black. You can also do this with the paint pen. I'm going to touch up some of the framing on this window, but then it's a line down the middle and a line down the middle horizontally. So vertical and horizontal plus sign line. And I'm going to do that to this window is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have 3 lines, 1 line down the center, and then another line on each side, and then a line down the middle. And then this one is going to be a vertical and horizontal line. Next, I'm going to paint the wreath that is above the door. So I'm going to rinse the number 4 round brush, and I want green and white on the brush. I'm going to make a circle, and then after the circle, I'm going to make little X's that go along the circle to create the texture of the wreath. Next, I'm going to do a second layer on the sign. So I'm going to take my 12 bright brush, take brown and white, and a little bit of yellow. So by the time we do this second layer, we shouldn't see any of the pole or the sky colors showing through. And next I'm going to use the 8 long round brush, specifically the fine point of it, and black to outline the edges of the shape of the sign. And you could also do this with a black paint pen. Next, I'm going to paint snow dots in the sky. So let's use the number 4 round brush and titanium white. And this is very simple. You're just painting white dots throughout the sky. I'm also going to use the white paint pen to draw snowflakes. So if you want to keep this simple and just do snow dots and no snowflakes, that's fine. And also what we can do, I'm going to use the toothbrush to splatter little white specks. So I like to take the toothbrush, add a little bit of water to it first, apply the white paint, test it out first. It should be a nice consistency where it's not too drippy but not too thick, and you just flick the brush all over. It's mostly going to show up on the dark part of the sky, but it's fun to have it show up like overlapping the cabin or parts of the gingerbread or the trees. You can pretty much flick the brush all over the painting. And then I'm going to use the white paint pen to draw snowflakes. So I like to do an X and a line down the middle, and then you just kind of decorate that with different patterns and lines. And I'm going to do this all throughout the sky, big snowflakes, little snowflakes. Next, I'm going to put a Christmas tree on the right side of the cabin. So I'm going to take my T-square and do a vertical line. So this one I want pushed pretty far to the right because I don't want it to cover up too much of the cabin. So I'm only going to have it overlap briefly and then kind of go off the right edge of the canvas so we don't see the full tree here. But same technique of the vertical line. I'm using the green and the number 8 long round brush to make the branches. And then when this dries, I'll do snow and ornaments and a star at the top. Next, I'm going to do some touch-ups of the snow using the 4 round brush. Actually, this is the 8 long round brush. So I'm doing another layer of bright white. So by now, all of that should be dry, and that just adds a brighter white layer onto the trees, and then the snow that's on the cabin roof. I'm just doing another bright white layer at the very top of it. And then I'm going to paint some reflection on the ground. So I'm going to take, this is the 8 round brush, but you can do this with any of the round brushes. So this is titanium white with a little bit of yellow. And I'm just doing some loose little horizontal lines. You can even do some reflection on the snow. Next, I'm going to load red onto my paint palette. So this is Pyrrole Red. It just happens to be the red that I grabbed. If you want to use a Cad Red Medium or an Alizarin Crimson or whatever red you want, it doesn't make a huge difference. So that's this, the red, Pyrrole Red, and the 4 round brush. I'm going to do little dots on the wreath. And we can do a little bow on the bottom of that. And if you want to change anything about this design, you're welcome to. I'm going to take some titanium white, and before this red dries, I'm just going to take a little bit of that white and just kind of blend in some of that on the bow and maybe on the wreath as well, just for a little bit of highlighting. Next, I'm going to decorate the gingerbread man. So I'm going to start with titanium white using the 4-round brush, and I'm going to do little spiral lines on the arms and towards the bottom of the legs. Then I'm going to rinse and do Mars Black for the eyes and the mouth. So 2 little dots, and you can do this with a paint pen if you want. And then I'm going to use the red for the buttons. So 3 little dots for the buttons. And then before this red dries, I'm going to load my brush in a little bit of titanium white and just do like a little highlight on the left side of each of the buttons. Next, I'm going to do a candy cane decoration in the snow. So I'm going to take my round brush and titanium white. So this is the 4-round brush. And do a little candy cane shape with the white. And when the white dries, we can do red stripes on it. Next, I'm going to do the snow on the Christmas tree on the right. So I'm going to use the round brush and white to do the same kind of branches that I did on the trees on the left. Start on the bottom of the tree, leave a gap between your rows of white branches and stroke down, working your way to the top of the tree. When that dries, you can decorate the tree. So I decided that I'm going to decorate the Christmas tree on the right. If you want to decorate all the trees, you're welcome to do that. So I'm just going to make this simple and just do colored dots. So this one's the red, and I'm using the 4-round brush to just create little red dots throughout the tree. And then I'll use the yellow as well as the blue. We can create the stripes on the candy cane, so do little diagonal lines going up the candy cane shape. I'm going to take titanium white and make a little snow pile below the candy cane. So I'm just going to take a little bit of white, kind of go over that, grab my little dot of blue for some shadow, and randomly add some dark blue shadows kind of throughout the landscape, a little bit under that Christmas tree on the right, and a few kind of loose lines at the bottom. And we can make our windows brighter by just taking some titanium white and adding like a little bit of white on the inside of the squares of the window. So I'm going to do this to each of the windows. Just adds a little bit of brightness. And perhaps the triangle window would have a little bit of snow piling on the top of the frame. So I'm going to add a little bit of snow. And next I'm going to do the star on top of the tree. So I recommend mixing yellow and white together for nice coverage. I'm just going to use the 4-round brush to paint a star shape and then paint that in solid yellow or yellow mixed with white. And when this dries, we can actually outline it with a paint pen if needed for to help define the shape better. And maybe our little gingerbread man would have some highlights on his eyes. So I'm taking the 8 long round brush point with titanium white, and I'm just going to do a little dot on the upper left part of each of the eyes. The final step in this painting is the lettering. So I recommend having a baby wipe handy in case you need to mess up. I've messed up my lettering twice already because it just ends up not fitting, or I don't like the way the cursive looks or whatever. But a baby wipe will erase it really nicely. As long as it's not dry, it'll still erase it. So you have like a good minute maybe after you write it to erase with a baby wipe and try it again. But I'm going to do fresh Christmas trees. And again, you can have this say whatever you want. And maybe a little Christmas tree over here on the right. We can use a paint pen to outline. We can outline the sign. I know we outlined it earlier, but maybe we got to re-outline it. You can outline some other things in the painting, like the candy cane, the star. Maybe there's some snow piling on top of the sign. To make this just a little bit of extra light brown down here. I did try the lettering with the white paint pen. It ended up not having as much contrast as the black. So maybe next time if I did this painting, I would do a lighter brown layer, like a really light brown layer so the black shows up better. I'm doing a little bit of white lines on the left side of the pole. And then, so this is the 4-round brush in titanium white, and I'm doing little dots of snow kind of accumulating on the string of the string lights. Lots of little details in this painting, and you can decide to leave certain details out or change things. And the last thing I'm going to do is outline the star with the black paint pen. So this helps to define the shape a little bit better, and I'm going to outline the candy cane. And that is the conclusion of our Christmas tree A-frame painting. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.